If you're watching this, pause for a second. Imagine a creature so dangerous that the Galactic Council banned its very name. They called it the Apex, a living extinction event. Every species that tried to capture it lost entire fleets. But humanity? We didn't send armies. We sent one man. If that kind of story pulls you in, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because what happens next will make you question who the real predator in this universe is. The lights inside the containment vault dimmed as the final layer of the energy barrier slid into place. Rows of alien dignitaries filled the observation hall, their scaled and chitinous faces reflecting a single expression, fear. Beyond the transparent alloy walls, something moved. It wasn't a movement meant for mortal eyes. It was deliberate, slow, terrifyingly aware. The creature's massive silhouette rippled against the crimson containment fields. Its hide absorbed the light, muscles shifting beneath armor that looked grown, not built. When it exhaled, the walls thrummed with subsonic pressure, as though the very air trembled at its will. The apex predator, specimen X-93, the deadliest organism the galaxy had ever catalogued and now supposedly under control. Supposedly, muttered one of the council envoys, a violet-skinned Thyran whose tentacles twitched nervously. The neural dampeners are holding? They're holding, replied the containment director, though his voice lacked conviction. For now. No one dared to speak louder. The predator had already slaughtered 3 handlers, 2 technicians and 1 general, all in silence. It didn't roar. It didn't rage. It simply ended lives when provoked. That, more than anything, terrified them. Rage was predictable. Silence was not. The chamber's central doors hissed open, and a single figure stepped through the mist. Not armored. Not armed. Just a man in a worn research coat, his boots echoing softly against the floor. His hair was streaked with gray, his eyes sharp but tired. He looked human, but the aliens around him stared as if he'd wandered into a nuclear blast with no suit. Dr. Elias Wren, said a council voice from the speaker above. You are aware that entering the vault is a death sentence? Elias glanced at the observation deck and half smiled. So is ignorance. I'll take my chances. The Thyran envoy sneered. You think human curiosity can succeed where our best minds failed? I don't think, Elias replied calmly. I observe. That's the difference. He approached the containment field, eyes locked on the shape beyond the light. The creature's gaze shifted. 2 molten orbs, not eyes but focused furnaces of perception, turned toward him. The walls hummed. Sensors spiked. The apex was watching him, and for the first time in recorded history, it didn't strike. Elias tilted his head, studying it. You're magnificent, he said quietly. But you're not just muscle and bone, are you? You're thinking. A sharp alarm cut through the silence. The apex's pulse rate rose, but its movement remained slow, almost calculating. It stepped closer to the barrier, lowering its massive skull until it loomed over the man barely half its height. The audience held their breath. Director Varn hissed through the comms. Dr. Wren stepped back immediately. Elias ignored him. He looked into those furnace eyes and saw not rage, but confusion. He took a single step forward. You were hunted, weren't you? Torn from wherever you belonged. The apex froze. Its claws retracted slightly, its breathing steadied. Every camera in the room zoomed in. Elias raised a hand, palm open, no threat in his posture. The apex mirrored the movement, not perfectly but enough for the air to shift from terror to wonder. He's communicating, whispered one of the analysts. No, Varn snapped. He's provoking it. Elias smiled faintly. If I were provoking it, you'd already be mopping me off the floor. For a long, impossible moment, the predator simply stared. 2 sentient beings, one the galaxy's nightmare, the other a fragile human, held a wordless conversation. Then, without warning, the apex withdrew into the shadows, curling its vast body into stillness. The crowd erupted in whispers. It retreated. It responded. What did he do? Elias exhaled slowly, eyes never leaving the dark corner where the creature now rested. I stopped trying to break it, he said, and I let it breathe. The council members looked at each other, unsure whether to be impressed or alarmed. To them, empathy was weakness, an evolutionary quirk that got lesser species killed. But the human had just demonstrated control through something no alien civilization had ever weaponized. Compassion. Director Varn slammed his claws on the console. Enough of this. Terminate the experiment. The Council has decreed that specimen X-93 is too volatile to risk containment. Elias turned sharply toward the observation glass. Terminate? You've seen its power. It cannot be tamed. It must be destroyed. Elias's jaw tightened. He looked back at the creature, then back at the faces above. You've been trying to dominate it. You fail because domination breeds resistance. What you fear isn't its strength, it's its will. Dr. Wren, the voice of the High Counselor echoed, cold and metallic. You overstep. No, Elias said evenly. You underestimate. Silence. The apex shifted again, rumbling low, not a growl, not aggression. Almost like it sensed the tension through the air. Elias turned to the guard station. Open the field. The control room erupted into chaos. He's suicidal. Override that command. Containment breach risk. But before anyone could stop him, Elias keyed in his override code. The energy field flickered. A low hum filled the vault, and the barrier faded like mist in sunlight. The apex rose to its full, horrifying height. Every instinct screamed at Elias to run, but he stood still, breathing slowly, keeping his eyes steady. The creature moved closer, each step shaking the ground. Its breath was warm and electric. The room above was a riot of orders, alarms, and shouted commands, but Elias heard none of it. The world narrowed to 2 heartbeats. One human, one something beyond comprehension. Finally, the apex stopped an arm's length away. Elias whispered, You don't want to kill. You just don't want to be alone, do you? The predator tilted its head. For a second nothing moved. Then, slowly, impossibly, it lowered itself to one knee, its massive head bowing until it almost touched the ground before him. Every voice in the observation deck fell silent. Even the alarms seemed to hesitate. Elias exhaled shakily. That's what I thought. And then, softly, the creature's eyes glowed brighter, locking on his face with something almost questioning. He smiled. You and me then. Let's show them what trust looks like. Above, Director Varn turned away, whispering into the comm, Gods help us. The human just made it choose. The lights dimmed again, and for the first time since its capture, the apex predator lay still, not from restraint but from calm. The galaxy had seen humans fight. It had seen them build. But this was something else entirely. Somewhere deep within that silence, the universe had just learned a new kind of fear, the kind born not from monsters but from men who could befriend them. And as the scene faded to black, the narrator's voice lingered like a promise. They tried to domesticate the apex predator, but the human? He just said hello. The surveillance feeds from the containment vault ran non-stop across the command deck, a dozen alien eyes studying every angle. On one screen, the apex predator sat motionless, coiled in shadow like a mountain waiting to breathe. On the other, Dr. Elias Wren sat across from it, cross-legged on the cold alloy floor, speaking softly as though to a friend. No restraints. No barrier. Just air between them, and an unspoken understanding. It had been 6 days since the field was lowered. 6 days of tense silence, broken only by the hum of security drones and the rhythm of Elias's voice. The council had allowed the experiment to continue only because curiosity outweighed their fear, barely. Every minute, a dozen safety contingencies hovered on standby, ready to vaporize the entire vault if the apex so much as twitched wrong. Elias didn't seem to care. He had stopped wearing the sensor suit, preferring the comfort of simple fabric. You watch everything, don't you? He said quietly, sketching on a data pad. That's not instinct. That's cognition. His tone was gentle, the same cadence he might have used with a wary dog back on Earth. The creature's eyes glowed faintly in the gloom. It didn't respond with noise or movement, yet Elias sensed the attention. He began reading aloud from his notes, describing stars, oceans, the scent of rain. It was nonsense to the aliens observing him, but they saw something that unnerved them more than violence ever could. The apex listened. After the 4th day, it began to mirror him, subtle movements at first. When he tilted his hat, so did it. When he raised his hand, its claws shifted fractionally. It wasn't mimicry. It was connection forming molecule by molecule. In the observation deck, Director Varn scowled. It's patterning his behavior. That's predatory mimicry. Elias looked up at the nearest camera. Or maybe it's empathy, he said. Your choice which one you fear more. At meal hours he shared food. It didn't take the offering at first, it had learned that food usually meant traps. So Elias simply set the metal tray down and walked away, leaving it untouched. By the next day the tray was empty. He didn't mention it, but his faint smile said enough. His nightly reports grew more contemplative. It doesn't eat unless I leave. It avoids confrontation. It's testing me, waiting to see if I break trust. I think it's seen cruelty before. That line, spoken in a tone of quiet conviction, unsettled the council chamber more than any threat. What kind of intelligence did a creature possess if it could measure trust? On the seventh cycle, while recalibrating a hollow emitter, Elias accidentally dropped a tool that sparked on the floor. The sudden burst of light triggered an immediate reaction. The apex lunged forward, not to attack but to shield him. The creature's body moved faster than his eyes could follow, its clawed limbs intercepting the perceived threat with startling precision. When it realized there was no danger, it froze, its claws embedded deep into the wall inches from his shoulder. Elias exhaled carefully. "Easy," he said, voice steady though his heart raced. The creature withdrew, lowering itself again, its posture almost apologetic. The observation deck erupted in panic. "Terminate." "That was an aggressive act," someone shouted. Elias snapped, "If it wanted me dead, you wouldn't be watching this feed. Stand down." His voice was the first truly sharp one he'd used, and it silenced the room. Afterward, he sat near the creature again, his tone softer. "You're not the monster they think you are you?" he murmured. The apex responded with a low rumble, not a growl but something gentler, deeper, almost melodic. He froze. That sound wasn't random. It was a tone. A frequency that resonated at the edge of comprehension. He played it back later and found it mirrored his own voice patterns, a primitive imitation. He began experimenting carefully. Each day he spoke the same phrase, "Apex." At first there was no reaction. Then, faintly, the creature's throat vibrated, producing a guttural approximation, "Apex." The first time it happened, every scientist in the observation room fell silent. The apex had spoken a human word. Not mimicry. Recognition. Director Varn confronted Elias afterward in the debrief chamber. "You're creating a risk beyond comprehension. If it learns language, it learns deception." Elias replied evenly, "Language isn't what makes something dangerous. Intent does." Varn's tone sharpened. "And what's your intent, human?" Elias's expression softened, almost sad. "To show it there's another way to exist than fear." Later that night, Elias reviewed archived council footage from the Apex's capture. The images were brutal. Entire forests scorched, alien soldiers screaming as they were torn apart, tranquilizer rounds bouncing off armored skin. But something in the footage caught his attention. A smaller version of the creature, young, wounded, dragged away as bait. The Apex's final rampage had begun not from hunger, but loss. He closed the console and whispered to himself, "You weren't hunting. You were protecting." The next day his tone changed. He didn't speak as a scientist but as someone who understood grief. "I saw what they did to you," he told it quietly. "They took something from you. I know what that feels like." The creature's chest vibrated with a sound he hadn't heard before. Not aggression, not mimicry. Something mournful, resonant, like thunder swallowed by sorrow. Elias sat on the floor again, legs folded, unafraid. "I lost someone too," he said softly. "Different war, same pain." No cameras captured what passed between them in that moment, no measurable data, no quantifiable exchange. Just two survivors acknowledging each other. Over the next few days, the apex began positioning itself closer to him each cycle. At rest, it no longer faced the walls, it faced him. It started recognizing his footsteps before he entered, adjusting its breathing to match his voice. The sensors showed synchronized heart rhythms during prolonged interactions. Impossible by biological standards. By the 10th cycle, Elias's reports read more like journal entries than scientific documentation. "It doesn't fear me anymore," he wrote. "That's progress. But it's also dangerous, not because it's violent, but because the council will fear what it represents, equality." That night, while reviewing his feed, a technician stumbled into the vault unannounced, a critical breach. The doors hissed open as the guard entered to collect a data chip. The apex reacted instantly, rising to its full height, a blur of shadow and fury. The technician froze, the color draining from his scaled face. "Down?" Elias's voice cut through the air, firm, commanding, instinctive. The predator stopped mid-lunge. Its eyes flicked toward Elias, then slowly, unbelievably, it lowered itself back to the floor. The technician scrambled out in terror. The entire command deck fell into stunned silence. Elias stood there breathing hard, realizing what had just happened. The apex had obeyed a human word. He turned toward the nearest camera, eyes steady, voice cold. "You wanted control. You'll never have it. What you're looking at isn't submission, it's trust." Behind the reinforced glass, Director Varn whispered to the others, his voice trembling. It listens to him. And that, Elias murmured as he sat down again beside the creature, is the beginning of everything you don't understand. The apex exhaled softly, lowering its head near his shoulder, eyes half closed. In that moment, predator and man rested side by side, two beings who had every reason to fear, choosing instead to learn. And somewhere in the depths of the galaxy's most secure facility, something ancient stirred, not within the creature but within those who watched. The realization that perhaps the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't the apex itself, but the human who could make it gentle. The weeks that followed blurred into a strange rhythm, a quiet ritual of observation and coexistence that defied everything the Galactic Council believed about predators. Dr. Elias Wren arrived each morning to find the apex already waiting, seated near the vault's reinforced glass, its massive frame coiled but calm. It no longer tested the boundaries or growled at the guards. Instead, it watched Elias, and when he spoke, it listened. For the first time since its capture, the apex ate regularly. It accepted water directly from his hands, and it no longer flinched when he approached. The council's analysts documented every moment, their screens filled with graphs that could not explain what was happening. They saw behavioral change. Elias saw awakening. "Look at it," he said during one debrief, his voice calm but firm. "It's not a beast. It's aware. It's choosing restraint." Director Varn folded his chitinous arms. "You call it restraint. I call it calculation. You're confusing patience with compassion, human." "Maybe that's the problem," Elias replied. "You can't imagine something powerful enough to choose peace." He left the chamber before Varn could respond. The council could measure his progress in data streams, but they couldn't feel what he did, that subtle current of shared understanding between two beings who had both survived being caged by fear. In the vault, the apex's breathing filled the silence like a low heartbeat. Elias sat across from it, holding up a hollow projection of Earth's oceans, vast, blue, alien to this sterile place. "This is home," he murmured. "Water as far as you can see. Creatures bigger than ships but gentle. They hunt, they feed, but they don't hate." The apex tilted its head, the amber glow of its eyes reflecting the image of waves rolling endlessly across the hologram. It made that soft rumble again, the sound Elias had come to think of as thought. "Home," he repeated slowly. "Do you remember yours?" The creature's chest vibrated with a sound like shifting thunder, its gaze lowering. Elias didn't need words to understand. Whatever home it once had was gone. Later, in the dark hours when the observation deck emptied, Elias recorded a private log. "It's adapting faster than I can study," he said quietly. "But not like a machine. More like, it's healing. I think it's remembering what it was before the council made it a weapon." He paused, fingers trembling slightly over the console. "I don't think it trusts them. I think it only trusts me." Outside, in the black corridors of the research citadel, not everyone saw this as progress. Whispers passed among the guards and scientists, talk of risk, of contamination, of a human undermining years of containment protocol. To them, Elias wasn't a pioneer. He was a liability. By the third month, the apex could follow basic commands. When Elias said stay, it stayed. When he said safe, it relaxed. But what alarmed the council was not obedience, it was protection. The creature began reacting violently to anyone who entered the vault without Elias's approval. During a routine check, a guard reached for Elias's arm, trying to pull him away from the creature's enclosure. The apex rose to its full height in a single fluid motion, letting out a low roar that made the walls quake. The guard froze, his weapon shaking. "Easy," Elias shouted. He stepped between them, palm raised toward the creature. "It's all right. He's not a threat." The apex's breathing slowed. It blinked once, then crouched low again, watching Elias closely. The moment stretched thin before it finally settled, its muscles unclenching. Elias turned to the stunned soldiers. "You see? Not instinct. Just. It's learning restraint." Varn's voice crackled through the intercom, hard and cold. "You're not teaching restraint, Doctor. You're creating dependence. It's imprinting on you, that makes you dangerous to it and to us. Or maybe it's the first time it's had something to protect," Elias said quietly. That night, while the council argued in their glass chambers, Elias remained in the vault, sitting near the creature. He could sense its unease. It paced, claws scraping faintly against the alloy floor. "They don't understand," he said. "They think trust is control. But you already know that's not what this is." The apex lowered itself beside him, its tail curling near his feet. Elias leaned against the wall, exhaustion pressing into his bones. "They'll try to end this soon," he whispered. "You can feel it too, can't you?" The creature's massive head tilted, then pressed gently against his shoulder. The gesture was so startlingly human it stole his breath. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, you understand." But the next day proved his fears were right. The council summoned him to an emergency session. A hollow projection of the apex filled the chamber, surrounded by flashing data streams and casualty predictions. "The council has voted," Varn declared. "Specimen X-93's neural evolution presents an unacceptable threat. Its emotional synchronization with you indicates potential manipulation. We cannot allow that to continue." Elias's heart dropped. "You're going to kill it?" "We're going to preserve galactic stability," Varn corrected. "You've done well, Doctor. Your data will prove invaluable. But the experiment is over." Elias looked around at the faces staring back, scaled, faceted, emotionless. "You're making a mistake. It's not a weapon. It's alive. It's dangerous," Varn snapped. "And if you can't see that, perhaps humanity isn't as rational as we were told." He didn't remember leaving the chamber. His ears rang, his pulse roared. Every step back to the vault felt heavier. The air itself seemed to sense what was coming. When he entered, the apex rose immediately, sensing his turmoil. Elias sat down, lowering his head. "They're going to end you," he said quietly. "I tried to stop them." The apex stared, then slowly reached out a clawed hand, resting it near him. He placed his own hand against the massive surface. The contrast was absurd. His pale skin against black scales, human fragility touching cosmic power. "They don't understand us," he whispered. "They think we're enemies of reason. But maybe reason isn't what saves a species. Maybe it's compassion." The creature's eyes softened, a flicker of golden light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The sound that came next was faint, halting, almost like speech. "Not alone." Elias froze. The word was rough, fractured, but unmistakable. He looked up sharply, eyes wide. You understand?" The apex blinked slowly. "Elias. His name. Spoken by something the galaxy had labeled unthinking. He couldn't stop the tremor in his breath. "You've been listening all this time," he whispered. The apex made that low, resonant hum again, softer now, almost reassuring. For a long time neither moved. Two living things from worlds apart, joined by something no equation could predict. When the door alarms blared moments later, the council's signal for termination protocols, the apex's eyes burned bright. It turned toward the sound, every muscle tensing, a silent question flashing in its gaze. Elias swallowed hard. "Whatever happens next," he said, voice low but steady, "you don't fight them for me. You fight for yourself." The apex let out a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the floor. Then it shifted closer, its form towering over him protectively as the walls began to pulse red with the alarm lights. Elias took a slow breath and looked up at the observation cameras one last time. "You wanted to study fear," he said. "You're about to meet the one thing stronger." The door seals disengaged with a hiss. Soldiers moved into position, weapons charged, but for a single breath of silence, man and predator stood together, no longer test subject and researcher but something greater. And in that moment, every observer in the chamber understood a truth too dangerous to admit aloud. The apex hadn't been domesticated. The human had simply taught it what trust meant, and now nothing in the galaxy could unteach that. The first sound was the siren, shrill, mechanical, merciless. It tore through the research citadel as red lights cascaded across the vault walls. Soldiers poured into the observation decks, armor gleaming under emergency strobes. The order was clear and absolute: terminate specimen X-93. No witnesses. No survivors if containment failed. Elias Wren stood inside the vault, his hands raised toward the apex, voice trembling but firm. "Listen to me," he said, his words nearly drowned out by the alarms. "They're going to hurt you. You have to stay calm. Do you understand?" The apex's eyes flared with gold fire, its breath deepening. Could feel the vibrations in the air, fear, aggression, intent. The air tasted of death. Elias took a cautious step closer. "If you fight, they'll never stop hunting you. But if you run..." The blast door exploded inward. Plasma rounds screamed through the vault, striking the walls in showers of light. The creature reared back, snarling for the first time since its capture. The sound wasn't anger, it was grief, raw and ancient. One shot grazed its shoulder, leaving a glowing wound. The apex staggered, then roared, a sound so deep it cracked the observation glass. Elias dove to the floor as heat seared overhead. "Cease fire," he shouted into the comm, but no one listened. The soldiers weren't fighting for containment anymore. They were erasing evidence. The apex lunged. One sweep of its arm sent 2 soldiers flying. The floor split under its weight. Alarms shifted to evacuation mode as pressure seals collapsed. Elias crawled toward the central console, fingers racing over the controls, overriding the secondary defense grid. "You're not dying here," he muttered. The lights flickered, and then amid the chaos, the creature's shadow fell over him. He looked up. Its breathing was ragged, eyes glowing brighter than before. "Apex," Elias said, chest heaving. "We need to move. Now." The creature crouched low, lowering its forearm like a ramp. Elias hesitated for only a moment before climbing on, clutching to the ridge of its armored hide. The vault doors sealed behind them, trapping the soldiers inside the imploding chamber. Corridors stretched ahead, long and dark, illuminated by the pulsing red of emergency lights. The apex charged forward, moving with terrifying grace, smashing through blast doors and reinforced gates as if they were paper. Elias shouted directions between gasps for breath, guiding it toward the outer transport bay. "Left. Through that maintenance shaft." Behind them, the council's voice filled the comm channels. "All units, lethal force authorized. The human is expendable. Do not allow specimen X-93 to escape the facility." Elias's blood ran cold. They weren't saving him. They were hunting him too. The apex slowed at an intersection, its head turning toward a barricade of armed guards ahead. The soldiers opened fire. Plasma bolts rained across its body, leaving molten burns. It didn't flinch. It surged forward, sweeping its tail in a single arc that sent the entire squad scattering. Elias could feel the tremor of its heartbeat beneath him, not rage but determination. They broke through to the transport bay, a vast hangar filled with grounded ships and emergency pods. Elias jumped down as the apex skidded to a halt beside him. The outer door was locked with council codes. He ran to the console, entering override after override, his hands shaking. Come on, come on." A blast ripped through the ceiling. Reinforcements descended, their jetpacks glowing blue. At their head, Director Varn emerged in full battle armor. "It ends here, human," his voice boomed. "Step away from the console." Elias turned, his face streaked with soot. "You still think you're in control of this? You've unleashed chaos," Varn snarled. "You think that thing cares for you? It will devour you the moment you falter." "Maybe," Elias said quietly. "But I'd rather die beside something free than live as your pet." Varn raised his weapon. "Then die." The apex moved before the trigger could be pulled. A blur of black and gold, it intercepted the plasma blast with its body, the shot burning deep into its chest. The creature staggered, roaring in agony. Elias screamed its name, rushing forward. "No. Stay with me." The apex dropped to one knee, its breathing ragged. It turned its head toward him, eyes dimming. And then, in a voice raw and fractured, it spoke. "Go." "Elias." He froze. The word struck like lightning, a sound both alien and heartbreakingly human. Varn fired again. The apex caught the blast with one clawed hand, absorbing it into its body. The air vibrated, energy surging through its scales. With a shuddering roar, it released it all at once. A shockwave of psychic force that shattered every light, every screen, every weapon in the hangar. Elias was thrown backward, landing hard near the control terminal. Sparks danced around him. Through the haze, he saw the apex rise again, its wounds glowing like molten veins. It towered over Varn, who stumbled backward, his armor cracked. "Impossible," the director gasped. Elias's voice echoed weakly through the chaos. "It's not impossible. It's loyalty." The apex seized Varn by the arm and hurled him across the hangar, then turned back to Elias. Its energy was fading fast, but its eyes never left him. "Go," it repeated louder this time. He slammed his hand on the console. The hangar doors began to open, a howl of wind filling the chamber as the void of space waited beyond. He ran toward the emergency pod, glancing back once more. The apex stood at the center of the storm, massive, unyielding, beautiful in its defiance. "You can still make it," Elias shouted. "Come with me." The creature shook its head slowly. "No, human, run." The last thing Elias saw before the pod sealed was the apex turning toward the incoming council fleet, its form outlined in light. It wasn't fighting to survive anymore. It was fighting to give him time. As the pod launched into the dark, the facility behind him erupted in white fire. Elias pressed his hands against the viewport, watching the inferno consume everything, but not the shape that emerged from it. The apex burst from the explosion, wings of burning plasma unfurling like a specter of vengeance, its roar echoing through the vacuum. He whispered its name once, voice breaking. Apex. The pod's navigation system shuddered, pushing him into hyperspace. Behind him, the Council's fleet pursued. The stars stretched into lines, swallowing him in silence. In that silence, Elias recorded a final log, his voice low, resolute. They think they've destroyed a monster. They don't realize they've awakened something far greater. Not a weapon, not a beast, but a will that refuses to kneel. And if the apex survived that blast... He paused, glancing out at the swirling light beyond the pod's window. Then the galaxy just met its reckoning. He leaned back, closing his eyes as the stars bled into infinity. Somewhere, far behind him, in the ruins of the citadel, the apex rose from the flames, eyes burning brighter than before, alive, unbound, and waiting. And the galaxy, for the first time, began to understand the truth Elias had tried to tell them all along. You cannot cage what chooses to love instead of fear. The ship drifted in the shadow of a dying star. Elias sat in the cockpit, staring at the fractured hologram flickering before him. A transmission looped endlessly, scrambled and full of static. He'd played it 100 times already. The voice buried within the distortion was faint but unmistakable. Human. Not gone. The apex. He exhaled slowly, the sound shaking with a mix of disbelief and hope. Weeks had passed since the explosion that tore apart the Council's research citadel. The galaxy believed the apex was dead, annihilated along with Director Varn's fleet. But that one phrase, buried in corrupted data, changed everything. Elias rose, pacing the cramped pod. His reflection in the viewport was gaunt, sleepless, and haunted. You survived, he murmured, pressing his hand to the glass. You always do. He had no weapons, no allies, and little fuel left. The Council had branded him a traitor, issuing a sector-wide bounty for his capture. But Elias didn't care. The apex had saved him. Now he would return the favor. The NAV system chimed softly. A faint energy signature had been detected, matching the apex's biological radiation patterns. Coordinates, the outer rim of the Chiron expanse. A place no sane pilot would venture. Elias set his course immediately. As hyperspace folded around him, he thought back to the first time he saw the apex, locked in chains, broken and silent. Everyone else had seen a weapon. He had seen something different, awareness, patience. It hadn't needed saving then. But maybe it needed him now. The ship emerged from hyperspace into a graveyard of wreckage. Dozens of Council frigates floated in ruin, their hulls twisted, their cores cold. The silence was absolute. Elias guided the pod carefully between the debris, eyes scanning for movement. Then he saw it, a pulse of light flickering from the center of the field. He accelerated. As he approached, the wreckage shifted. Not from engines or weapons fire, but from something vast moving beneath it. The apex rose slowly from the shadows, covered in molten scars that glowed faintly in the void. Its form was changed, denser, more luminous, as though the explosion had fused energy into its flesh. Elias, it said, the sound vibrating through the hull, deep and resonant. He stared, overwhelmed. You're alive. I was not meant to die. The apex's voice held no arrogance, only truth. Elias's throat tightened. They'll come again. They won't stop. The Council's already calling you an extinction-level threat. The apex turned its gaze toward the distant horizon, where a fleet's hyperspace trails burned faint blue in the darkness. They have always feared what they cannot master. But this time I will not run. You'll die if you fight alone, Elias said, stepping closer to the viewport. Let me help you. We can find somewhere they can't reach. No, the apex interrupted, its tone almost gentle. I learned from you, human. Survival without purpose is only another kind of cage. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace, hundreds of ships in tight formation, led by the flagship Eidolon carrying the new Council warden. The comm crackled to life. Elias Wren, came a cold voice, by order of the Galactic Council, surrender the specimen or be vaporized along with it. Elias glanced at the apex. They'll destroy this whole sector just to erase you. The creature's eyes narrowed. Then let them try. The fleet opened fire. Plasma beams streaked across the void, converging on the apex's position. The explosions painted the blackness in white fire. For a moment, Elias thought it was over, until the energy began to bend, curve, and fold around the creature like liquid light. The apex was absorbing it. Waves of blue energy coursed over its body, spiraling into its core until the void glowed like a second sun. Then, in one motion, it unleashed the power, a pulse that shattered ships like glass. Fragments of the fleet scattered, torn apart by the shockwave. Inside the pod, systems went dark. Elias was thrown against the console as power surged through every circuit. When the light faded, only a handful of council vessels remained, retreating in terror. The apex hovered amidst the debris, its breathing labored. Energy leaked from its wounds like liquid fire. Elias scrambled to his controls, rerouting power. "You're burning yourself out. This form cannot hold," it rumbled. "The energy I took must be released, or all will burn." Elias understood. The apex was becoming a living reactor. Its destruction would take half the system with it. There has to be another way. There is. The apex's voice softened. "You." Elias's heart pounded. "What do you mean, me?" "You carry my mark. My resonance. You can take what remains, and live." He shook his head violently. "No. I won't steal your life." The apex moved closer until its immense form filled the viewport. "You gave me freedom when I knew only obedience. You gave me choice. Now let me return that gift." The pod trembled as the apex reached out, claws wrapping around it with care. A low hum filled the air, the resonance between them growing into a luminous tether of energy. Elias screamed as it surged through him, light coursing under his skin, but he didn't pull away. The apex's voice was fading. "Carry it forward," Elias ran. "Let them see that fear is not the chain that binds life, it is the fire that forges it." And then, silence. The energy vanished. The apex's body dimmed, dissolving into 1,000 motes of golden light that scattered across the void. Elias floated amid the wreckage, trembling, tears cutting through the grime on his face. He looked down at his hands, faintly glowing with the same energy that once pulsed through the creature. A fragment of the apex lived within him now. The comm crackled again, static, then a familiar voice. "Elias Wren, this is Commander Vale of the Independent Terran Alliance. We saw what you did. The Council fleet is in retreat. You're not alone anymore." He leaned back, breathless, a small, incredulous smile breaking through. "Not alone," he whispered. Outside the viewport, the debris began to drift, illuminated by the golden residue of the apex's last stand. Somewhere in the distance, the stars shimmered brighter, as if the universe itself remembered what had happened here. Elias reached toward the controls, setting a new course, not away from the conflict but toward it. Toward a galaxy that needed to understand that humanity was not prey. As the engines roared to life, he whispered one last promise to the void. "They tried to tame you, but you taught them what it means to be free." And with that, Elias Wren, the man who befriended the universe's deadliest predator, vanished into the stars, carrying its legacy within him. The apex was gone, but its will endured, beating in sync with the heart of the last human brave enough to stand beside it. The galaxy would remember the roar that defied gods. And this time, it would echo in a human's voice.